As we're at the brink of World War III, which will most likely be a nuclear war, what do we see happening amongst the potato brain ranks of the Republican base? The red hat turnips are giggling and laughing and acting like they've actually accomplished something, thinking that this is a video game, having no concept of what an actual nuclear event would look like. In fact, they're so lazy, they haven't even heard some of the things that have come from their own party, from people within this administration about the dire risks that are faced by a nuclear war.
I recently visited Hiroshima in Japan and stood at the epicenter of a city that remains scarred by the unimaginable horror caused by a single nuclear bomb dropped in 1945, 80 years ago. It's hard for me to find the words to express what I saw, the stories that I heard, the haunting sadness that still remains. This is an experience that will stay with me forever. Yet this one bomb that caused so much destruction in Hiroshima was tiny compared to today's nuclear bombs. The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima had a yield of just 15 kilotons of TNT, whereas today's nuclear warheads range in size from 100 kilotons to over 1 megaton. A single nuclear weapon today could kill millions in just minutes. Just one of these nuclear bombs would vaporize everything at its core. This is the reality of what's at stake, what we are facing now, because as we stand here today, closer to the brink of nuclear annihilation than ever before, political elite and warmongers are carelessly fomenting fear and tensions between nuclear powers. We must reject this path to nuclear war and work toward a world where no one has to live in fear of a nuclear holocaust.
They discount all of this as fake news. And that was Tulsi Gabbard, one of the Trump administration's intelligence officials, who he deliberately discounted, saying that a nuclear war and her experience of being in Hiroshima and Nagasaki decades later brought into stark contrast the reality of what a nuclear war would mean and what it looks like to the people on the ground. We've been so desensitized that we forget the humanity of people all around the world. This is why the Republican Party constantly labels people as murderers, killers, rapists, terrorists, because it lulls you into a sense of imagining all of these people as inhumans. And that makes it easier for the US and US interests to commit genocide without the guilt of those actions sitting on the shoulders of all the gravy seals that are cheering for this sort of action. This is the height of stupidity paired with the height of ignorance. And that, in a nutshell, describes Americans in general, the Republican Party, and Trump supporters in particular. Now, as you see voices coming out to the forefront, debating what's going on within Republican circles, you have to ask yourself the question, does this signal a rift within the party? Take a look at this from Tucker Carlson.
Growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my, you pull out the phone and use it.
It's in Genesis. So you're quoting a Bible phrase, you don't have context for it, and you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology? I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two.
Hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian. I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
So is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yet nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
That's Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz having a debate on the merits of attacking Iran. And what's interesting about this conversation is that Tucker Carlson, when he wants to be, can be a pretty effective journalist. And you see how clueless Ted Cruz is and how he cites biblical precedent to justify bombing another country, and in particular, bombing another Muslim country. And Ted Cruz is a perfect example of what a uneducated, ill-informed MAGA political mouthpiece looks like. He is wrong on the historical context, and he's also wrong on the biblical context. Take a listen to this from Dan McClellan.
There are absolutely no data that support the notion there are any biblical end times on the way. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. And all of the data point to the conclusion that there is nothing in the Bible that is labeled a prophecy that has anything at all to do with anything that is going on today, much less anything that's going to happen in the future. The data point unilaterally to the conclusion that the things that are labeled prophecies in the Bible are things written by people in certain times and circumstances to certain groups with certain rhetorical goals that were focused on their own time period or the near future. These were things that people hoped or feared would happen in their own day or in the near future, or these were warnings that were being leveraged in order to try to influence behavior on the parts of their audiences in their own time or in the near future. The book of Ezekiel is about the 6th century BCE. The book of Daniel is about the 2nd century BCE. The book of Revelation is about the end of the 1st century CE. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are about the late 1st and early 2nd centuries CE. They're not about today. And the more people try to leverage the fear or hope or expectation of an imminent second coming or end times or apocalypse in order to try to structure power and values and boundaries in ways that serve their own interests, the more we do harm to our ability to thrive, the more we do harm to minoritized, marginalized, oppressed, and otherwise vulnerable groups, the more we do harm to the mental and emotional and the physical health of young people, the more we do harm to our own future, only because of our raging and belligerent dogmatism and refusal to think critically about these things. The only end times that could plausibly be in our future are unrelated to biblical prophecy and are directly related to the harm we're causing to our ecosystems and to our environments and to our social stability and to our ability to respond to environmental and to social and to geopolitical and other kinds of crises that we are causing by our own refusal to think critically about our dogmas. We need to grow the hell up and do better so that we don't bring about an apocalypse, because it will have nothing to do with the second coming of Jesus. It will have only to do with our own self-destruction. And I don't want to see that happen. And I hope nobody else wants to see that happen.
What you heard from Dan McClellan is a perfect illustration of how far off base most of the evangelical crowd is when it comes to their pining for the end times and these actions that they keep advocating for, which will lead to a nuclear catastrophe. These are people who sit in pulpits and listen to preachers who are telling them that anybody brown is evil and should not be trusted. That is the core ethos that strings the Republican Party and MAGA together. And Ted Cruz is a perfect example of a mouthpiece for that. And you've seen other people like Marjorie Taylor Greene echo sentiments similar to what Tucker Carlson says. But the reality of it is that what you're witnessing with these debates is not any sort of fundamental shift within the Republican Party or even a rift within the Republican Party. What you're seeing are two factions of the Republican Party that are wholly owned subsidiaries of two completely different foreign interests. The Tucker Carlsons and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes are wholly owned Russian assets, and the Ted Cruzes and other evangelicals are, in varying ways, assets of Benjamin Netanyahu. That is what we're seeing. This is not a principled debate. This is an argument about who gets to own all of the spoils of whatever conflict this regime decides to get into. When you dig into the motivations behind the evangelical crowd, let's call it what this is. For all of their finger pointing at Muslims, for all of their finger pointing at the Taliban and Al Qaeda and ISIS and ISIL and all of those, there's a certain element of all of that finger pointing that is accurate. But every accusation they hurl is also represented and well represented in the ideology that they want to bring together. Let's be clear about this. The Republican Party is a messianic death cult. I mean, we might as well call them vanilla ISIS or Al Qaeda. That is the Ted Cruz wing of the Republican Party. There's a line of evangelical thought that advocates for Jews to locate in Israel and as many Jews as possible to be located in Israel, and that a nuclear war needs to happen. And once we're at the brink of absolute destruction, the second coming of Jesus will come down and win the war against evil for the forces of good. And what that means is all the true Christians, the white Republican rich Christians, are going to be saved by their magic sky daddy, by Caucasian space Jesus, and all of the other lower classes, including the Jewish people, are going to be wiped out and damned to hell. That is the motivating drive of the Republican Party. You see these motivations come through in their efforts to implement and permanently implement every single element of Project 2025. And as I mentioned earlier, and as you heard from Dan McClellan, none of this holds water. So when we take inventory of where we are right now, we are where we are because a group of uneducated, toothless morons who probably have very few branches in their family trees blamed all the brown people for the problems of their own laziness and their own making, all the while ignoring that they were being manipulated by the billionaire class that has stolen from them for the last half century or more. That is why we are where we are. And in their hate of anything that comes with a brown face, a black face, or anyone that isn't a white Christian male, they found their avatar in Donald Trump, who was going to bring them divine retribution. That is why we are where we are. We are here because the stupidest people were able to mobilize and elect somebody to be the vessel for their retribution.